This is part two of the practice paper. I'm making these papers to help you to gain confidence, to develop a skill set, to be able to tackle these questions and these exam papers with confidence so as you can absolutely gain marks and pass your GCSE with a C grade to an A star grade. The more analysis, explanation and precise technical detail you'll put in, the higher grade you'll get. I strongly recommend you do the question on Black Americans. It's a must. I think you've got great subject knowledge for it. What does source A show you about the treatment of Black Americans in the 1930s? Again, this is a 2-mark question. Look at the caption, look at the picture. A photograph of a drinking fountain in the south of the USA in the 1930s. Don't waste time on this. Get it done in 2 minutes. Okay, it's only asking you to really understand source material and gain information. So, what does it show you? It shows you separate drinking fountains. So it shows you that Black Americans had to drink from separate drinking fountains, and white Americans as well. It shows you the white fountains were of a better quality than the black drinking fountain. This shows a social hierarchy in the USA in the Deep South. It shows you that Black Americans were referred to as coloured. You can also deduce that Black and white Americans in the South were segregated, and that this was possibly through Jim Crow laws. We know it was Jim Crow laws, but through looking at the source you could deduce that this was Jim Crow laws in action. 2 marks, bank it, move on. This threw some students last year, but you know the answer to this. You've just got to bring it to life visually in your mind. Describe the contribution of Black Americans to the entertainment and media since the 1970s. 4 marks. You've got to describe an outline. So think. Black Americans have been successful in music. Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5. In the movie industry in Hollywood, such as Eddie Murphy. Or Will Smith. In your era, think about Will Smith, Oprah Winfrey, black rappers, etc. Run DMC. Any black Americans that you can think of who have developed stardom and been given an opportunity in the entertainment and media world since the 1970s. But you've got to explain more. A more detailed description will contain 2 accurate points or more. For example, Black Americans have been hugely successful and have contributed to breaking down racial barriers, to ending segregation, to bringing about more equality and opportunity, and being great role models for other young Black Americans. You could talk about Tamla Motown becoming a worldwide record label. Michael Jackson's Thriller remains the best-selling album of all time. The 1982 pop video to Thriller, probably one of the most advanced pop music videos ever. Hip-hop and rap developed in the 1980s out of the inner city ghettos. Remember, ghettoisation had replaced segregation as a form of segregation, but through postcode and where people now had moved to or lived. You can highlight the position of many Black Americans by using actors who have won Oscars. An example you could look to would be Morgan Freeman. And Oprah Winfrey has become one of the hugest, most popular TV show host and black role model for Black American women. So you just got to describe and outline. This is a more difficult question. Use sources B and C and your own knowledge. Please read that, because I keep saying this and you've got to get it in your heads. You've got to use the sources and back it up with your own knowledge. Intertwine them. If you can do that, you're going to get 6 marks. Explain why the treatment of Black Americans on public transport had changed by the end of the 1950s. 6 marks. Look at these 2 sources about public transport in the USA and answer that question. It's really good if you annotate around the sources and get your thoughts together in your notes and tick off when you include your own knowledge into the answer. So source A is from a school textbook. And source B is a photograph of a white-only sign being taken down in 1958. In the early 1950s, on the city buses of Montgomery, Alabama, the law stated that black passengers could not sit in the first 10 rows, and if the bus became full, they would have to give up their seats for white passengers. You already know that this is looking at the Montgomery bus boycott of December 1955, which ended the following year by November 1956, a whole full 12 months of a boycott of the buses. We know this boycott by black Americans enabled the ending of segregation on the buses, mainly because it was hitting the white-owned Montgomery bus companies in the pocket economically. But we also know that this type of segregation was immoral and cruel. So, use sources B and C in your own knowledge to explain why the treatment of black Americans on public transport changed. Answers address the question clearly will score 5 and 6, but we're really looking to get 6 marks. You've got to explain the concept of change and improvement. The sources show change, don't they? You've got to make it implicit that you can see that source C is showing a white guy taking down this segregation rule. For 6 marks, you've got to develop the idea of change and improvement, but also use both sources and your own knowledge. So, for example, answers will focus more sharply on the reasons for change. Source B describes the restrictions on the buses for black passengers as a result of the segregation laws of Alabama. You could expand upon this, how you had to give up your seat, how a white person could refuse to sit in the same row as black people, how white bus drivers were cruel to black passengers who had to pay at the front and walk to the back of the bus to get onto the back of the bus. You could then describe Rosa Parks' actions in December 1955 and how she was arrested and how she said she was tired and refused to give up her seat and what she meant by the term tired. And then Martin Luther King's involvement with the Montgomery Improvement Association and the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, and how they led a year-long bus boycott to victory, and this led to the Supreme Court in the White House ruling that segregation on the buses was unconstitutional. It was the first time, through passive resistance and peaceful methods, that black Americans had united together en masse to show they could inform and develop change. How important was the issue of education in the civil rights movement? You're going to get one of these questions worth 8 marks. It's a mini answer, a page and a half of writing. You've got to give detail, accurate analysis. How important means how far. Develop a reasoned evaluation that keeps focus on the issue of education. Make the judgment. Don't just describe what happened, but make a judgment. How important. Keep coming back to answer it. Education was really important because in 1963 the James Meredith case showed that the President JFK would go to great lengths to protect his position. This showed that the American government, the Democrat government, was serious about education and improving civil rights for all. Another reason to show why education was important was so you keep coming back to answer the question. Paragraph sentence starters will be imperative. Make sure your first line of the question absolutely makes a judgment. Education was very important, but not the only reason for the civil rights movement having success. For the highest question, highest answer, there will be a greater attempt to explain and analyse the importance of education to the civil rights movement. There should be a focus on the Brown v. Topeka 1954 case, which resulted in the declaration of the Chief Justice that segregation in education was illegal. Remember, Linda Brown and her mum having to get to school through railway lines and through different blocks. They wanted to go to a local white school. Then the Little Rock Nine in 1957. James Meredith in 1963. Elizabeth Eckford, remember, was one of Little Rock Nine. And 1960, James Meredith was supported by JFK to attend his Mississippi University. So it showed that the presidents gained presidential attention and highlighted the offence of segregated education. Education was a catalyst for change. Why? Because it affects everybody. Everybody knows someone who's gone to school or is at school. We've all been to school. Plus, we've got children coming up through the school system. So it was a means of improving economically and ultimately political status. Schools are a melting pot, so socially they can change society. There can be a dynamics for change. So therefore, the concept of education was vital, because education is a mini version of society. If they could change it there, they could change it anywhere. That's why education was really important to the civil rights movement. But make a judgment, so was transport, so was music, and breaking down racial barriers through rock and roll, etc. in the 50s and early 60s. The Freedom Riders, transport, politics, famous individuals such as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. There are other reasons why civil rights was propelled forward. Here's some images. Elizabeth Exford, bottom left hand corner. James Meredith, segregation in schools, Monroe schools in Kansas. People protesting against the Brown v Topeka Board of Education, stop race mixing, and Linda Brown and her mum celebrating that the High Court had ended segregation due to their landmark court case. Section B, I'm going to spend 2 minutes on now. 10-mark question. Do try and get to 2 pages in your written answer. Think like a timeline and make a judgment. You're always going to get a how far, how much progress was made. It's about developmental change. It's about over time, and you've got to try and compartmentalise each chronological decade. Answer 1 question. How far did American society change between 1929 and 2000? It gives you a writing frame there. Tick off as you go. Annotate, add a few more notes on the end, so as you're answering the question. The effects of the Depression, the impact of World War II, changes in popular culture, the policies of the American presidents since 1970, and any other relevant factors. Looking at societal change, so you've got the opportunity to do one answer on societal change. That could be looking at ranging from the New Deal all the way through to World War II and its impact on American society and recovery and helping the boom years, changes in popular culture, 50s rock and roll, driving cinemas, music, etc. The birth of the Hollywood film star, birth of the rock star, Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, all the way through to the 60s, 70s, popular protests, etc. Policies of the American presidents. You could look at Reagan and Reaganomics. You could look at Bush and Clinton, how it impacted upon American society. Or you could do a question on how far did the lives of black Americans change. Either way, you'll have some of this knowledge already in your paper. Always have up your sleeve a popular culture answer, 1929 to 2000. You never know if it's going to come up on the paper. How far did popular culture change? How much progress was made in popular culture? How did popular culture change between 1929 and 2000? Remember, if you have that up your sleeve, if it comes up, then it's an easy question because you can relate to it, and I know that you can bring that to life in terms of your own mind and your own thinking and your own experience as young teenagers. Remember to have an intro. The main part is the meat of the sandwich. It has to be structured into paragraphs, and a strong final conclusion, making the judgment. How far did lives of black Americans change? How far did American society change? You can even bring black America into the first question, but you've only got to do one question. So decide which one you're strongest on, and then really, really go for it. So if you were doing question 5, you could give classic examples of how black Americans have developed, come forward and become better role models, give more opportunity, end of segregation. But the race riots of 1992 still show, for example, that black America was still oppressed, there was still inequality, and ghettoisation had replaced segregation. You can also talk about rap and the culture of gun crime, etc. had replaced, was now the language of violence because of the inequality that still existed in America. But still, progress had been made. So it's going to be a yes and no type answer with you making a judgment on just how far things had changed. I hope this helps. Thank you.